Right, slug pellets, a very controversial subject I feel these days. There has been a lot written about them in the last sort of 10 years, about them poisoning animals and how people shouldn't use them and should use alternatives. Well, I've tried some of the alternatives and a lot of them don't work. We've all heard of the sort of coffee grounds, the crushed eggshells, and they don't work. They make a barrier around your plants and a slug won't cross them, but they don't stop them from coming up from underneath your plants, and that's literally where they come from. And if you'll investigate plants in a greenhouse, for instance, in sort of a 3-inch pot, no doubt if you took a plant apart and the soil and compost apart, and I've done this, you'll find a slug in there. So having a barrier around and stopping it getting in there in the first place isn't a good defence for your young plants. Now, I don't mind if a slug comes along mid-season and starts chomping on a plant that's already established and growing well. I really don't mind, and I think good luck to you, let you get on with it, and I won't try and stop that. But what I am interested in is my young plants at a seedling stage. I know, for example, this season, and it has happened to me this season, I got a load of sweet peas going early season, and there was a root trainer set of 32 plants, and all bar 2 of them were coming up, and overnight they were decimated by 2 slugs that were actually in the soil. And I know they were in the soil because I'd put them in my kitchen to germinate. So slug hadn't come from outside or come up through the floor, it was already present in the compost. So that being said, that was difficult to protect against. Now, I've got a little film that I did a month or so ago, and I'll just run that for you just now. Okay, the rice just simulates a box of slug pellets, and this is what we do. We just sprinkle slug pellets all over the bed, and it's what thousands of gardeners have done for decades in this country. But look at the results, look how many you're putting down here. I'm going to roughly count these in a square foot just to gauge a figure. I'll do that off camera and come back to you. Right, what that was is I just had a tin with some rice in it, and I just spread it the same as most people would spread slug pellets, with the idea being to just count how many pellets were in a certain area, given how people shake them out of a tub these days. The number is on your screen now, how many came out per square foot. Now, we've all seen this many a time before in other people's gardens or on other allotment plots. People get the slug pellet out, rip the top off, and they're shaking them willy-nilly all over the place. And a couple of days later they come back and the plants are still decimated. And they're thinking, this isn't working, so what do? They get the slug pellets out and they spray even more around, and you know, it's almost turning the soil blue with them. I was one of them. I used to do exactly the same. I was thinking, these things aren't working, I must need more of them, must need to eat more of them to kill more of them. So I did that until one day I was on an internet forum and I read what this lady had written and how she protected her greenhouse. I've looked for the post again and I cannot find it. I would love to find it and talk to her and thank her. But what she did is that she would put 2 slug pellets on her bench in the greenhouse. 2. Only 2, one at either end. When one disappeared, she replaced it. And her theory was that if you put a whole mass of slug pellets down, for each one you put down, you're attracting a slug. So if you put in 1,000 slug pellets down in a small area, you're attracting 1,000 slugs. Not all of them are going to eat your pellets. But what you have done is you've told the slugs where the food is by the plants that you're trying to protect. You fed them by the plants that you're trying to protect, and you've only killed some of them. What's more, you're making the problem worse, because a few days later you think this isn't working and you put even more slug pellets down. And this is where I believe the problems have started to happen with slug pellets, and where we're starting to get reports of wildlife dying for it. So I've also done some research into that side of it as well, and I did find one official report that said a hedgehog would need to eat 1,000 slug pellets in a single sitting to kill it. and I thought, well, this is ridiculous, you know. But when you look at the amount of pellets we're spreading down, it's possible that that could happen. So going back to the lady who put the 2 on the bench, I started to try this and started to use it, and I found it was working. I was actually getting less slug problems using less pellets. I don't just stick with the 2 pellets, I must admit. On the floor of my greenhouse at home now, there's probably 5 or 6, and there'll be 10 or 20 on the bench on various trays. And what I'll tend to do is, if I've got a mass of plants here, I'll put 1 at each corner. If one disappears, I will replace that one. And my plants, for the most part, are protected. I still get a little bit of slug damage, but nowhere near what I used to, and certainly nowhere near the damage I used to get when I was sprinkling them like confetti. Also, something I've done, consciously decided to do, is to not use slug pellets outside. I will only use them in covered and protected environments. So for instance, this hot box behind me, I've started to get the brassicas coming up. You've just seen that this morning. Over the next sort of 2 or 3 weeks, as they start to pop up, I'll start to put a few pellets in there. It's a protected environment. It's not attracting slugs to them, and it's only killing the odd rogue slug that might find its way in there. So I'm doing my bit, and I'm not putting lots and lots of chemicals down. All I want to do is protect the young plants. As I say, once they're established and growing away healthily, if half a dozen slugs want to attack plants, that's fine. There is a space just over here. I don't know if you can see properly over here. I had Cavallonero in there. I've got kale over in the corner, and I've got sprouting broccoli down the side. The Cavallonero has been decimated by the slugs. I didn't worry about it because I've still got the other veggies around this tunnel for us to eat. So they were kind of sacrificial for the slugs to eat. I'm not really too concerned about that. But in the early days, if you've got a tray of, let's say, 100 plants, they can be decimated overnight because they're only ½ an inch tall, and the growing tips are eaten out, and you've got to start again. So that's the only occasions I will use them. I will use them to protect young plants, and I will use them very sparingly, and I will use them in a very, very protected environment. And I think that's all right to do. So I'll leave the rest up to you. You decide what you want to do with slug pellets. I've no doubt there are people out there watching this who are thinking, well, what an idiot, but I can only do what works for me, and that does work for me. As the season progresses, there are other ways of protecting against slug, and I will use them. They are much more, shall we say, environmentally friendly, and I will go over them as we cross them. There are several methods you can use apart from the eggshells and the coffee grounds. So later on in the year I'll detail them as they come up. But for now, that's it. I just thought I've got to say something about this, because it's almost become a subject that people shouldn't talk about, but I want to talk about it. I want to use them. I have 1 tub of slug pellets, and it'll last me a lifetime. You know, I'm only applying sort of ½ a dozen pellets at a time, if that at all. So anyway, you use what you feel fit, and thanks again.